You were saying, PJ, it's been so long since you've read Small Gods.
Yeah, it's February, I believe. Is that correct to say? You know, at this time of year, it's hard to keep
Mid
track.
February. Happy Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah, happy Valentine's Day. Uh, I think I finished reading this last year. I think my reread was complete before Christmas. So that's where we're at, but it's one of those ones that sticks with you. It's one of those Discworld books that comes up often in conversation. So why don't you give us the official intro, Andy?
Cool. Yes, welcome to I've Never Read Discworld, a podcast with PJ Hart, whose voice you just heard, and myself, Andy Luke, who has not read most Discworld. Um, each episode we go through a book. Today it's Small Gods, as you might have guessed. Um, and when was it? Victor Glan's May 1992. So incredible. Like, right, we're still early 90s.
Yeah,
Books a
Andy's put that in
year.
the notes with an exclamation mark beside 1992, and I assume the reason for that is because you're surprised that how many books there are, but yet we're still in the early 90s. Is that fair?
Right, yeah. I mean, I can barely manage a book a year, and but Terry had his, he had his publishing deal at this point. So I've got 5 books backed up looking for publishers. Step forward, step forward.
Well, I mean, yeah, the first thing you got to do is write them, and like five books ready to go is no small achievement. I would say that's probably approaching Terry's level of output, surely, you know?
Mm, maybe less. Yeah.
I mean, two books a year he seemed to be hitting at this stage. So
Yeah,
unless you've been spending the last 10 years writing those books, you're
right,
doing all right.
right. Well, there is one that's about 6 years old. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's all right. That's still in there. So I mean, it's not a competition, and if it was, neither of us are going to win against Terry Pratchett. So that's fine. We can move on.
I don't mind the cover so much in this one. It's the usual Josh Kirby, lots of crazy action going on. Um, I yeah, yeah, I didn't really take in much of that. Um, but I suppose I haven't seen the other covers. What edition are you reading?
I read this one digital again, but my first time round, I would have read the cover version that you're holding in your hand currently.
So I will read aloud the back cover blurb to center us. There are plenty of spoilers to come.
Mhm.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was, hey, you. For brother, the novice is a chosen one. He wants peace and justice and brotherly love. He also wants the Inquisition to stop torturing him now, please. Surely the best novel Terry Pratchett has ever written, and the best comedy, John Clute Interzone. So,
Ah, Interzone, remember that? I think I have
yeah,
some issues of Interzone lying around here somewhere.
like, oh, goodness.
Yeah, I might actually have a rejection letter from Interzone somewhere. but but I agree with the sentiment. I think up until this point, there's an argument to be made that this is potentially one of the funniest Discworld books to date. So yeah, it's exciting times. Inquisitions and stuff like that are a weird British fascination off the back of Monty Python and stuff. I think that's very much within that world, isn't it? So after reading that, I mean, do you do that? You read the blurbs before you start reading the book, or
No,
do you wait?
no, and
No, you wait
actually,
till the
this
end.
is something since starting the series, all books, the blurb I only really delve into after finished or maybe in
Oh
the
yeah, I think
closing.
yeah, I think you told me that before. I
Mhm.
was wondering if your policy on spoilers had mellowed maybe after your exposure to Mark's talk last month, but maybe not.
Definitely has, yeah. Um, I so I we've spoken that I have not been an instant fan of Small Gods.
Yeah,
There's a
interesting.
number of things going on. So and a number of interesting side hustles. I'm a pantheist. I believe in all the gods, basically,
Hmm.
but I'm not a very good one. I'm a very lazy one. So I started reading this book by going through the top 30 religions from number 30 down away. I got to about number 20 and I got very bored. So I
Yeah.
abandoned that. But I did see a lot of the themes that come up in this book about religions, about the obsession with violence and
Mm.
inequality and splinter groups and leaders and who's the true chosen one. Um, uh,
Yeah,
Talking
that's
about
interesting.
pantheism, if I could recommend Grant Morrison's Super Gods,
Oh
which is
yeah.
an incredibly insightful book about that.
Mm. Even
What
as
else?
an atheist, I would second that recommendation. I think this is possibly the first time I've discussed this book with somebody who for sure believes in gods, because it feels very much as an atheist's perspective on religion. So is that maybe something that tempered your approach to it, do you think, or?
Yeah. So my journey coming from a sort of Christian um household, and where you can, if you're a moderate small c conservative, you can pick and choose what you like and stick with that and like not go around cutting off foreskins and stuff. um but we get in this world that we live in, people who identify religiously who are psychos, and when they do that, they speak for their religion, like it or not.
Mm.
That is a point of existence, as I see it, an actual fact. And I felt the same way. I moved to Buddhism, moved to atheism, and I felt the same way about atheism, that it was very boring. People, high profile figures, appeared to be looking for fights
Mm.
with people, or arguments, fierce arguments with people that were not always the people that should be fiercely argued with. And pantheism, I think, just represents something more open to me, that it's like there's a sort of a live and let live approach. Like, okay, you believe in X God, then somebody else should be allowed to believe in X God as well, and X God.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I guess there's an identity politics appeal to it for me.
Mm. Okay, yeah. By sheer accident, um, slash bad parenting on my part, my house has by accident become a sort of pantheist household. In that, as you'll be aware, even though my daughter goes to an integrated school here in Northern Ireland, she still comes home with like a lot of talk about Jesus. So like rather than just be like forcing my ideas on her or my beliefs on her, I'm like, well, okay, yep, that's one God that we can talk about. But let's talk about, the Irish pagan gods or the Norse pagan gods, other things that she would recognize from our culture, from like Christmas and from Easter and things like that. So we have those conversations in my house quite often. So we've almost kind of by accident kind of introduced an element of pantheism into our kind of family culture, which has been nice. And actually, from a cultural point of view, just like I can see the appeal for sure. So that's interesting. You just divulged that to me, you live on the air. So that's yeah, that's cool. I
I
think
think it's very relevant to what's
yeah, yeah.
going on in this book,
Oh,
because what
hugely,
we
yeah.
see is, Om is alive because of his followers, believers,
Mhm.
and that applies for every god. Superman is a god because he's been read for, was 60, 70 years now. Um, you know,
More,
stick
yeah.
that where you like. And if there's a church, there's a God.
Mm.
So
Yeah, something when you first sort of as we were reading this, I think earlier, you first alluded to me that maybe it wasn't going to be one of your favorites, even though it is very highly regarded
yeah.
in the canon, and it sort of got me thinking about when I read it when I was younger, and that idea that now seems so obvious and is so prevalent in certain parts of pop culture, that gods only exist because we believe in them. This is my first exposure to that idea, this book. And when you're raised in a very, very, I hesitate to say oppressive, but certainly a very all present Christian society as we've been raised in, this idea that you don't need God, that God needs you, if you're like 12 or whatever, is hugely liberating, is a massive perspective switch. And I think you know, people like myself who this book caught them at the right time and maybe opened them up to that idea, that'll stay with us forever, you know, and this book has stayed with me forever as a result of that. So yeah, interesting to think for, you know, for yourself coming to it later in life, maybe that's just part of that perspective shift, you know.
Mm. So I kind of found myself mellowing, but there were a few other. So I also had a misconception this book might be a sort of a well, what we do get in the finale, and I think was talked about a bit in Sorcery, where the gods are at war because one faction has their stereo too loud. I thought we might have had something like that. And also, I've got a bit of a, I guess it's just a choice, a bit of a preference as a reader for fast fiction. I,
Sure.
I don't gravitate towards slow fiction. So although I watched all of Mad Men and all of Better Call Saul, at times they were a slog, and I felt very much the same about Small Gods and also philosophy as well. I'm not somebody that is open to reading philosophy tomes.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, if you're, I think he does go a bit. Like I like the philosopher stuff, but I can see it does feel a bit self-indulgent at times. Yeah, for sure. And it's an interesting that you point out that the portrayal of the Discworld gods here feels different than it was in previous books. You know, where they're all stuck up a mountain playing chess or whatever. This is a very, very different portrayal. So I can understand why you would have a preconceived notion as to what a Discworld book about gods might be, and this isn't maybe what you would have come to expect based on what you'd read before.
I was watching before we come on there a bunch of Discworld fan videos talking about how this is their favorite book, and
Mm.
so it's really positive to hear so many people got so many things out of it.
See, this could be our hot take. That's what we're missing. We're not generating enough outrage clickbaits. You know, we need to say that this is your most hated Discworld book. We need to go on a diatribe here if we want to get some clicks.
You know, yeah, when I poured scorn on Mort, that episode's still like second in our
Yeah,
rankings
yeah,
or whatever. So yes, let's start some crap.
yeah. Or well, yeah. I mean, let's at least have a healthy debate about it for sure.
Thanks,
Um,
people like religion.
yeah, yeah. I mean, two Northern Irish guys debating religion. What could go wrong?
Well, thank you for joining us in today's episode of I've Never Read Discworld.
The stakes have never been higher.
Check us out
Uh,
on Twitter.
on that note, do you want to go into the blurb for the first section?
Yeah, okay. Um, so I divided these up into like, as I usually do, for about 5 page counts each. So part one, Om spake unto brother, lo did Nimrod spake unto him too. The Quisition seek to guard us from heresy. Om spake unto brother again and again. Poor brother Moderick. Brother offers sacrifices of lettuce to a really indignant tortoise. While plans are made to dispatch Vorbis, he invites brother into the inner sanctum.
Good job. I was quite curious to hear how you were going to tackle the pronunciation of brother.
I think
Um,
it's the only one.
you vacillated a bit there between the hard R and the A. It's a, yeah, I mean, I think now looking back as a main character name, it's a little hard to swallow. But when you consider it as a sort of, what would be the right word? If you think about it as a parody of Buddha rather than like a, you know, Ebonics kind of thing, I think it's a bit easier to swallow.
Yeah, that's a little extra wordplay. I think I possibly only noticed um, tonight when I was looking through the L-space annotations, which are especially delicious for this book, and we're going to be
They're
dropping a few
extensive.
of them.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that helps. And then I think you've got Lao Tzu wandering around at this stage, and he's meant to be Lao Tzu, the Taoist guy. My Eastern religion, my yeah knowledge of Eastern philosophy obviously pretty limited. So Yeah, I think that made it a bit more palatable for me. Numrod also a little bit on the cringy side as well,
Yeah.
considering the
A,
implications.
a lot of this first like chunk of like solid story, and I'll say this about Small Gods, it's not lazy. There's not a line of filler in it. Um, what was the original point I was talking on? Yeah, there's this sort of two-hander kind of feel that we get between Alm and Brother. This sort of kick back to old philosophical philosopher dialogues
Hmm.
is quite meaty.
And in terms of like Alm's portrayal as a character, like he's a shithead for sure.
He is. It
And I,
is certainly so much fun.
yeah, and like because you already mentioned Grant Morrison and stuff, so like that kind of grounded, down to earth portrayal of deities, essentially, that feels very much of that kind of world, of those kind of
Yeah.
Neil Gaiman, Grant Morrison, 80s kind of alternative comics, like approaches to topics of religion and religious characters and stuff, I thought.
Yeah, I'm sure I remember a late Sandman story where Gaiman had Thor telling really like obscene jokes.
Yeah,
And
stuff like
it's
that.
probably appeared throughout the Sandman run, and that'll be, I guess, part Terry's inspiration.
Yeah, yeah, or
Or
and
actually,
obviously
we're
that's
in
a
the
two-way
post
street.
92. We're in the post, I think maybe post Sandman era now. I'm not sure.
It's not finished, is it? I mean, it certainly exists at this point, but I don't think Salmon's not finished by 92, is it?
Are you game to talk if I do a quick Google?
Yeah, I can talk about things. While you do that, I'll read the notes. Um, little note, yeah, a little bit of continuity here. This is one of the standalone books. That's not a spoiler, actually. I'm not sure where Andy stands on spoilers at the moment. But so any hint that's kind of Discworld continuity here is always welcome. And the fact that Rincewind and Two Floor have been over the edge of the turtle, have checked to see what sex the turtle may or may not be, is a nice little reference. Because we're
That,
not sure.
that
Like at
got
this
me
point,
really
yeah,
excited, really
I'm sure it
happy.
did. Because at this
Yeah.
point in the story, Rincewind's arc could be complete for all we know. There's not an obvious tail hanging for his story, so any kind of reference to that, which I still feel is probably one of the high points of their adventures, is very, very welcome.
And we don't know which one of them it was either. It could have been Two Floor provided the leak. I get the impression we're not going to see Two Floor again, which is kind of a pity.
Again, we'll stay stum about that, obviously. Um, oh, nice little move, a nice little note here about the turtle moves, which is the kind of recurring motto, I guess, of the secret society within Omnia or Om. And that's a Galileo reference. Galileo trying to convince the Vatican that the Earth revolves around the sun, which is heretical for some reason. Still not sure why. Oh, yeah, so you've quoted the Latin. Good for you. E per si move. My Latin's rusty. And yet it moves. Yeah, yeah, it doesn't matter what the church says. Not going to stop the world from moving. Doesn't matter what the Church of Om says. The turtle is always going to move. So
Yeah,
yeah,
E per C movie. I think you did
move.
better than Yet Moves. This
No,
is
that's
what
better for sure.
Galileo told the Inquisition. I can't really imagine their reaction to that. I'm sure it wasn't particularly nice.
Short and sharp, I'm sure. And also, yeah, I love this idea that the Quisition exists in both in and ex formats. It's another nice Latin pun. You got the Inquisition and the Exquisition in this. So the Inquisition, from what I could tell, he never openly explains it, but so the Inquisition seemed to be basically dealing with people within Om. Um, so if you're a priest or a subject, then the Inquisition and you stray, the Inquisition's going to come at you. And then the Exquisition seemed to be involved in conquering places and taking places over in the service of Om. Is that your reading of it? Or I'm way off piste, am I?
Yeah, yeah, very much. Yeah, I think
Is it in
that's.
and
Let's see
yeah,
here.
maybe it didn't require that much
Yeah,
explanation. That's something I definitely didn't get the first time round. So Yeah, I have a vague recollection of reading this in that kind of initial flurry of Discworld that I would have read sort of between ages 12 and 14, 15. And and I was actually studying Latin at that time at school, but like who pays attention in Latin class? Nobody, obviously. So a lot of these Latin jokes at the time would have gone over my head, despite the best efforts of Mr. Crummy at St. Malachy's College. So yeah, it's nice to revisit some of that more subtle stuff because there's always so many layers in a good Discworld book, isn't there?
And in response to the Sandman thing, we were about halfway through the Sandman run at this time, 89 to 96.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought it went on a good bit longer than this, yeah.
I just wanted to read a lovely little biblical quote that I found on Elspace. It's from Song of Solomon,
Okay.
chapter 2, verse 12. Flowers appear on the earth, and the time of the singing of birds is come, and the voice of the turtle is heard in our land.
Nice. I would just like to point out for the listeners that on the notes, Andy has written, Yo, check out Song of Solomon 212. Like it's the hot new mixtape or whatever. So, but then, you delivered the goods. Yeah, nice one. Can see the connections here for sure. So I haven't
Um,
really talked about what actually happens in this, but like, I
yeah.
mean, like you said, it's quite slow. And I feel that like most people listening hopefully will have read it. So I think it's probably because it does take a little bit more scene setting or table dressing maybe than Terry's had to do in some of the books that led up to this because you've got basically a whole new country, a whole new culture to set up, a really big conceit in the fact that gods require belief to exist, which at the time to me anyway felt like a relatively novel concept. Then you've got the last believer to introduce, also the whole Lutze thing to introduce, which doesn't really go anywhere in particular in this book, but I'll say no more about that.
Ooh. We do get
Um,
a nice bit of closure at the end of this
well, yeah,
book on him.
bookends. Yeah, it's got good bookends, but in terms of like an opening gambit, a first sequence,
Yeah.
there is a lot of setup. I can't remember this amount of setup maybe since sorcery, maybe say. So yeah, not like yeah, like you alluded to already, not a huge amount of plot movement maybe by this point, by page 77, which is where we are now.
And we get quite a lot of background characters, supporting characters through the book, but it really does revolve around that threesome.
Mm,
And Am will talk to brother about things that Vorbis doesn't know, and brother will talk to Vorbis about things that Am doesn't know. There's kind of like a sort of a doorway between the three, or a wall, even blocking the three of them. Conversing. They're all very loud characters, or in the case of brother, well defined.
yeah, yeah.
Is just a total. He's a Malcolm Tucker of things.
Of the Pantheon, yeah.
And he does mellow through the book. Vorbis is he's terrifying, really. He's a nasty piece of work.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate Vorbis to the extent that I do now. The first time around, as a kid, when you read a book like this and you're like, oh, you've got that cartoon idea of the Inquisition in your head from whether it's from Monty Python or from Warhammer 40,000 or whatever, that these are like big, larger than life, evil, bad people. But then as an adult, rereading Vorbis and sort of seeing kind of the reasoning behind that, some hints at the kind of how he's arrived at where he is as a person, that banality of evil, that kind of hints at like of fascism, like for I want to say for want of a better word, that's what it is. It's religious fascism. How a person can arrive at that perspective is a lot more chilling. Like his how he's ordered the world in his head and can't be convinced that it can be anything else in the way he sees it. I think when you look around us today, certainly, that is a lot more chilling, for sure. Rather than just like seeing this kind of cartoon bad guy when you read it as a kid.
Yeah, he's a deeply dangerous man. Um, I find the writing around all three quite solid.
Hmm.
What you feel that Terry has given us a dangerous man, and from his conversations with people, whether they're on the literal chopping block, or it's just a quiet word in a private study. Um, terror walks with this guy.
Yeah, big time.
Um, Brother is Brother's a pretty fantastic focus character. He's really useful for leading us around stuff, and well, he has these remarkable abilities, but he's also a bit pathetic, I think, at times. He's he's undoubtedly an innocent, but he's also perhaps, as we get in the second part of the book, where he's seen all these things that Vorbis is doing, and he's still kind of turning a blind eye to it.
Mm,
And of course, we get the moral crux, that he is presented with a challenge where he basically can't do anything about them. And
yeah,
it would
yeah.
be kind of pointless regarding his own self health to do anything.
Yeah, I remember at the time, one of the few impressions that I do sort of recall from the first time I read this was being a bit wary and a little bit concerned that Brother was just going to be kind of another Rincewind, just kind of a bit of a sap. He was going to be like the religious version of Rincewind, he's a monk instead of a wizard or whatever. But I think, he summons a bit of righteous anger. He finds a bit more agency towards the second half of the book than Rincewind ever does. Well, it's not fair, but certainly more than Rincewind ever does in the early stories. And it's not as much of a crux of the book that he has to be on the back foot. Actually, kind of Brother's whole journey is about him finding agency in a way that Rincewind certainly didn't until significantly later. So yeah, it was nice to see that sort of happen for a character like that within one book rather than having to happen over the course of a series.
Yeah, and he is quite a likable character, despite my hard judgment of him. This condition of his memory is it's definitely quite fantastical. It's paranormal, I think. It's
Yeah, I think within the realm of Discworld, it's allowed for sure. And in a way, it gives him that extra little something, that in the way that Rincewind has the spell stuck in his head, Brother has the eidetic memory, so they have their little kind of the thing that allows him to exist in the world that they exist in. That's what makes Brother useful to Vorbis. Otherwise, even less would happen in terms of plot in this book, I suppose. And how he deals with it as well, and how the philosophers kind of deal with it is really interesting. Like people start to treat him less as a person once they realize his utility.
yeah, it's quite interesting where that utility, the fact of it being a utility is kind of what motivates the plot with regards to Vorbis and a Phoebe, and later with Didactylos and the finale. I mean, there's a lot of the scenes in the garden and in brothers' quarters were and here having dialogues, and Om's gradually breaking down his sense of disbelief.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're quite fun. I don't think they're certainly not the funniest stuff I've ever seen come out of Discord by a long way.
No, I think he has to warm up to that because it's a very new dynamic. And as the book goes on, he definitely warms up to it. But you're right, it takes a little bit of setting up.
For me, the big takeaway in this is the scene where Vorbis invites him into the inner sanctum,
Indeed.
and it's by extension of who Vorbis is. It feels very daunting, and Brother really pulls a rabbit out of a hat, so to speak.
Indeed. Yeah.
Hope we're not mixing metaphors there.
Well, it's allowed. It's definitely allowed.
So, what would have stuck out for you as one of the more resonant parts of this block?
Of the first block, as a sort of, yeah, I guess I sort of alluded to it already. For me, first time round, just the concept that a God who's obviously an analog for the Christian God could be brought low by a lack of belief. And I think for us, um, certainly, growing up in a place like Northern Ireland where a lot of people play lip service to religion, but who obviously don't genuinely believe in the things that are taught as part of that religion, like don't murder people. That's a good one. The fact that a God, if it existed, could be brought low by that lack of belief was easily my biggest takeaway from this first section when I read it as a child.
Because even this early on, we do get Brother confronting Om with various texts and things Om is supposed to have written and said.
Yeah.
And Om says, no, I never did that.
Yeah, yeah. It's clear from almost beat one in the story that the religion of Om exists to serve the priesthood of Om, doesn't exist to serve the people, certainly doesn't even really exist to serve Om because he's been kind of done over by it in a way. The fact that nobody sincerely believes in him anymore is as a result of all these twisted rules that his prophets, in inverted commas, have come up with. So yeah, as I say, like as somebody who was raised deeply, deeply steeped in religion, like that was hugely mind blowing for me at the time. On the reread, I don't know. As I say, I would agree with you. I found it to be quite a lot of setup, as I've mentioned already. But I had it in the back of my head that I knew where this story was going, so I didn't mind. I actually read it quite quickly. I think I read the first section, maybe in 2 sittings max, maybe even 1.
All right, so we'll move on to the second block. Part the second. As witnessed by holy man, cut me own hand off de blah, purveyor of candied sultana, pets can do tricks. Am informs brother that Vorbis is a psycho and beseeches him their travel together to Thebe. General Frit gets smited. Sergeant Simony leads a party across the desert and the sea, and as commanded, shooteth the porpoises. The sea queen strikes a ship. Oh, but for Om's intervention, most holy, praise be to Om. His dialogues of philosophy, safely to Ephebe, land of philosophers. They find an audience with the tyrant who offers wine, fruit, and meat, though Vorbis forbade. Oh, I think it's out of my system now.
That's the end of the biblical language, is it?
My grandfather on my father's side was a Belfast City Mission preacher.
Wow.
Father's also done like loads of speaking arrangements around the church. He worked for their youth and community wing for about 20 years,
Wow.
30.
So you've got it. It just comes
Don't
naturally
McLeod.
to you. I get it.
Don't McLeod.
Yeah, I spent quite a while last night for work. I promise this was for work. Listening to Ian Paisley's sermons.
Everybody hug PJ.
Yeah, that was tough going, and nothing came of it. Like I was looking for a clip I could use in this documentary I'm making, and I didn't even find one. So yeah, that was quite harrowing. But in terms of that kind of the certainty of a character like that, actually it does get you thinking a little bit of Om and their priesthood, and maybe not so much Vorbis, who's maybe a bit more of a pragmatist, but that fire and brimstone language that's required to keep an operation like that alive, to keep people enraptured and to keep people afraid. The fact that that was just happening like down the road from us for decades.
It's pretty,
Yeah,
pretty crazy. Yeah.
yeah,
I think
quite
that's
chilling in a lot of ways for sure. But yeah, I'll
it.
not be doing that again anytime soon.
No, come on, not in
Yeah, that's done.
in relation to small gods. The fact that Vorbis has that 101% certainty and brother has like maybe 18%. He's
Mm.
really not unsure of himself, which I guess is why brother is our character of identification, or it is a really good choice for it. Um,
Yeah, because
but
brother
maybe
believes in
hitting those
Om.
poles against one another.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, brother believes 100% in Om, but Vorbis believes 100% in Vorbis. And that's why
And Om
He,
believes 100% in Von on Om.
yeah, exactly. So that puts too much pressure on brother. But I do like this stuff. There's a couple of things here that I enjoy. This is where it does start to pick up for me significantly. Which when you think about it, it's only it's quite a long book. It's only 77 pages in by your account, and things are really starting to happen. I like the introduction of simony and the military aspect of as a culture. I think is quite fascinating, and also the sea as a deity. I think those it has to be addressed if you've got a god in this who's basically a turtle, but is a kind of Christian allegory, then you need to address those kind of big elemental forces in religion like water, thunder, fire. So the fact that she personifying the sea as a queen, I think makes a lot more sense than some of the male personifications that you see in various religions. Certainly, any sailors will always refer to, and that's where this comes from in the book, isn't it? Because they're like, no, you can't, you can't shoot dolphins, porpoises, whatever they are. You can't do that. Somebody's definitely going to die if you do that.
Yeah, Forbes just displaying a complete lack of common sense. And I've been working on this book about Alaskan fishermen, and
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
obviously went into the Discovery Channel show. What's it called? Very popular. Um,
is this about the trawler people? No.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I've got the Star of its book right in front of me. It's one of my few books not packed from my house move. Here we go. North by Northwest, and from the book, from the TV show. Goodness sake, it
I keep
doesn't
on
give
saying
it
Ice
down the
Road
cover.
Truckers, but I know that's
Deadliest
wrong.
Catch, right? That's
Deadliest
along,
Catch.
and it's really readable actually. There we go, segment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, from what I've seen of the show, like I used to sail a little bit when I was younger, but I mean, and that's why like I quite like this section when all the stuff about the sea and all the kind of myth and religion associated with it. But like to do what those guys do, like that's just something else. That's insane.
That's dangerous. That's um, military warfare danger, what they're faced with out there. But one of the things that really comes across in Deadliest Catch is how much they hold to superstitions,
Uh-huh.
and things that you do and don't that don't necessarily have a basis in science.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And there's absolute swear by belief in these, and when things go wrong, they will sort of "Oh, we didn't do such and such ritual."
Mm. Yeah, I mean, even with my very basic, and I mean very basic experience of sailing, like I would always refer to a boat as a her, would never refer to a boat as an it ever, you know, just like basic superstitions like that. Like I wouldn't even think twice about that, you know. So yeah, and any kind of anything that humans have been doing for thousands of years. So like sailing boats, riding horses, growing food, all the rich traditions and stuff associated. I find that interesting, and it doesn't have to necessarily be religious for me to find it interesting and to feel that there's value in participating in it. But the sea in particular feels special, and I think it's really telling that's where Terry goes. We meet the Sea Queen before we meet Blind Io a little bit later on, the Thunder guy. But the first big encounter between gods in this is between and the Sea Queen. I think that says something. It's such a ubiquitous force in human development and such a dangerous force in human development that it has to be reckoned with.
But look, where there's religion, there's opportunities for sales, and you're going to want to buy something from the most holy prophet, Dibla.
Yeah,
That was a joy. That was a joy to see. That caught me up.
yeah. It's a great concept, the fact that every culture on the disc has a dibbler, essentially. Um,
Well, I wondered, is this the same one, or is this a relative?
yeah, they're definitely, I
You know,
think it's, I can't
is there a
remember when,
Dibla only novel coming up?
if only that were
Please.
true. If only that were true. Uh, I think it is established with a certain degree of finality later on that they are definitely different people, but that
A family business.
no, I don't think they're necessarily related. I think it's meant to be one of those kind of forces of the Discworld that like where the need for somebody to sell a hot something on a stick arises, a Dibla will manifest to fill to fill that space. Um, I do think the naming convention here is maybe sailing a little bit close to the wind in terms of cultural sensitivity, but
Suppose it could be a
like
company name like McDonald's.
yeah, maybe. Yeah. But anybody who's read this for in Discworld knows exactly what's going on here, so nobody's who's going to be offended by this or anything like that.
It actually put. I wondered if Terry was going to go the Chaucer route. So I studied for my A level Chaucer's Partner's Tale,
Oh yeah,
which if you can get past the language of 1,000 years ago is a once you translate that you unlock a great tale about a man who basically gets rich off selling people bits of stick and telling them that they were the bits of stick on the crucifix.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like this bookmark was hanging about at Golgotha, or this is
Why
actually one
wouldn't
of
it be?
the. I'll quick find one of my own books, and I'll
Yeah,
not
yeah.
holy book.
Never
Um,
missed an
and
opportunity.
did you know Buddha actually subscribed to patreon.com/Andy Luke?
I have it on good authority.
So yeah, that's what the Partner's Tale and Prologue is about, and it's got that magical stories within stories within stories thing going on, and yeah, so I really saw the parallels between the Partner and Dibla.
Nice. Yeah, as I say, because it's a standalone, like any kind of connective tissue, anything that connects us to the rest of Discworld is always welcome, and all those like slightly different takes on Dibla, like Dibbler is always going to be one of my favorites, so it's always welcome.
This is where Vorbis really sort of steps into his own before they leave with I think he dispatches one of the conspirators. I forget the guy's name.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting this whole kind of conceit that I mean Vorbis has basically engineered a war. He like send somebody off to do some preaching. The guy either did or did not get killed. If he did get killed, it was almost certainly his own fault, and Vorbis
Yeah,
is
this
using
is
this as an
Brother
excuse to launch
Murdoch,
a
isn't
war.
it?
Yeah, yeah,
And General Frit, who believes a turtle moves, he gets dispatched.
he's
And
done.
there's parallels there with like false flag campaigns, the invasion of Iraq, manufacturing reasons to go.
Yeah, I mean goes back. Yeah, obviously goes back.
He hit
Even,
me. Well, he didn't, but
yeah,
he did hit me, so I'm going for him.
and it's such a way. I mean, we're so kind of jaded about it now, especially because of Iraq. I mean, I guess at this time, in the early 90s, Vietnam and the Gulf of Tonkin incident, I suppose, probably would have still been, certainly for somebody of Terry's generation, still would have been kind of the go-to for this. And it's so cynical, but like the way that when when you read Vorbis's slant on it, the way that he sort of sells it to everybody else, you can just be like, of course this happens. Of course this happens all the time. You know, it's quite frightening in a way.
Right? Yeah, he's so certain that his narrative, he doesn't believe his narrative, but
No,
yeah,
the fact that he doesn't believe it, but he's able to sell it so well, that's what's quite terrifying, I think. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've nailed it.
because it's the
Exactly.
only one narrative, and that's actually the problem with religion, the idea of the one,
Hmm.
um, and it's only you're either in or you're out, and there's nothing else. And I think it was Alan Moore said, when you decrease God to one single note, one idea, it's quite dull. And
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
get that sort of multitude of aspects, that's when you can play.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this whole book sort of feels like an argument in support of that.
I'm really liking this. It's certainly a good one for talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like you've obviously warmed up to it, but you're right. This is a book for discussion. Definitely. Yeah. I see you've name dropped Andy Serkis doing he does one of the audiobooks, is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm told he does the audiobook.
Or that's part of the new collection that's
As
just
part of the
coming out.
new
Yeah.
collection. They're about 9 or 10 hours each.
That's quite
I
exciting.
went with the BBC radio adaptation, which is really quite good. Obviously, you can imagine with three main characters and the pace of this book that they can do that. I think it was about 2 hours long.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And one of the most fun parts was when we get to the philosopher's pub when brother is looking for, turns out to be Didactylos. And in the philosopher's pub, it's an Irish pub. All the philosophers are Irish.
Of
And
course it is.
it's just hysterical. It's a lot of fun. They do
Yeah,
a
it's
good
like
job
part
on
of me is like, what's the James Icaster quote? I've never been so offended by something that I 100% agree with.
it.
Like, yeah, that is slightly offensive, but it's also accurate. Yeah, it's fine.
Do you know, I think I could probably get away with slipping a line or two in that scene.
One, 100%. Yeah.
But how are we going to find a philosopher?
I'm telling you! You listen! A finite intellect, right, cannot by means of comparison reach the absolute truth of things, because being by nature indivisible, truth excludes the concepts of more or less, so that nothing but truth itself can be the exact measure of truth. You bastard! Says you. Right!
Philosophy.
Brilliant. We've been talking, yeah, like you say, this is a good one for discussion, so I think we better keep it moving. I'll do the next one if you like.
Oh,
I'm ready. Or is
just
there anything
one
else
more,
before we
one
move
more
on?
factoid for Bell Space.
Go it.
Greek name Didactylos, who we meet here, also translates from didactic, but also translates as two fingers.
So like two fingers up to the establishment or whatever, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah. It's not very, yeah, lost in translation for any Americans. I guess it's the same as doing one finger, except we have to do two.
I quite like Didactylos. We're only sort of really introduced to him in this part, but
Yeah, he's got
minor
plenty more to
characters is
do.
my favorite.
Yeah. All right, I'll do the next bit then. Part three. Now that all the biblical speaks over, I feel that I can do one. Here we go. Alm and brother seek assistance at a philosopher's pub. Phorbus and the tyrant clash. Didactylus and nephew Ern are visited by a clever tortoise, revealed to be a god. Brother is given a tour of the library. Phorbus instructs on the nature of truth. There are labyrinths. Tyrant is deposed. Brother memorizes the library and they flee by boat, with Phorbus following. It's been a while. I feel like if there's any drinking games associated with their podcast, it's been a while since I've said a lot happens in that bit. But a lot happens in that bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sort of pacing up now. What do we think of the tyrant? He's not very tyrannical, really, is he? He's quite pleasant,
No, I know, and I
really.
feel that like a lot of what you would put into this character, if this was your first book or your first time dealing with these kind of concepts, a lot of what you would put into this character has already been put into the patrician. In terms of that benevolent dictator, kind of like tyrant, but actually everything works the way it should. You know, it feels like a very similar concept, but right? Or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm way more scared by Vorbis than I am by the patrician or the tyrant.
Well, yeah, because at least you know the patrician is always going to do the kind of logical thing, whereas Vorbis feels like a little bit more unpredictable in that sense that you don't really know how far his belief's going to take him, which is definitely scarier. And I think, but the tyrant here feels like maybe a soft-bellied version of the patrician. You know, he's a version of the patrician who hasn't been tested to the extent that the patrician has been tested. You know, like he's still. If it wasn't for brother, you know, the tyrant would have got the best of Vorbis. You know, only for the fact that the brother's able to navigate the labyrinth or whatever. You know, Vorbis would have been dead in the water. So yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the Tyrant and about the portrayal of kind of how Thebe works as a society and stuff, and how Vorbis is kind of able to come in and get the best of them. It doesn't feel like the best political conflict we're going to see in Discworld. Maybe the best we've seen so far, but certainly not the best we're going to see moving forward, you know.
It's is it all over by the end of this block? It's over fairly, yeah, it is. It's fairly quick.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
What's a Greek urn?
It's a good one. And
About 250 an hour.
hey, boo.
That's what it goes from. Uh,
I knew there. I was like, I've heard this. You wouldn't let me reach for it there. Yeah.
Ern Didactylus's nephew doesn't really do a lot for me. He feels like he's just there. But we get doing various tricks like drawing triangles in the sand and
Yeah, it feels like a slight retread. You know, it's a dynamic that he's kind of, I hesitate to say attempted because he's very successful, but there's that kind of master apprentice dynamic. You know, we've seen that before in the likes of Pyramids.
well, pyramids actually is a really interesting touchstone for this because the two books both feel very very alike, although they're doing different things. They feel very standalone and
Yeah, well, agreed.
removed from the rest of Discworld. And I think reading this sort of I got a bit nostalgic for pyramids as well, you know.
Yeah, you can definitely see a bit of overlap, and I think the uh, the Jelly Babians. I was trying to remember how they do make an appearance. They do make a cameo later on in this book. So yeah, I agree. They do feel. I know that yeah, like they're both standalone, but they sort of feel a bit more interconnected, maybe, or they feel more connected to each other than they do to the rest of the series. Is probably the right way to put it. Yeah,
Um,
lost in it.
yeah, the stuff in the library is quite good. It made me quite nostalgic for libraries. I miss Oxford Brookes University's various libraries. Um, just hanging out there, even though I didn't read most of the books. It's nice to work in a
Yeah, there
non-stop
is
library.
something about, and I do tend to use the local libraries, visit your local library, quite a lot. And they're after me. I've got some overdue books at the moment, which I'm currently balancing my microphone on as a huge mark of disrespect. But Belfast has an awesome big central library that I would have studied in a lot as a secondary school student, and I would visit with my kids quite often. And has some really quaint features. Like it still has a CD library. Like you can take CDs out of the library, and obviously just rip them onto your computer and keep them forever. Not that anybody would ever do that, but yeah, it's if anybody's seen the BBC crime drama Line of Duty, it's the police headquarters in Line of Duty is actually Belfast Central Library. It's this really big, impressive place. I highly recommend visiting it. And bring your kids there and let them slobber over everything and make everything sticky the way I do. They can't get enough of it. It's great.
Mark Burrows told us last month that Discworld Pratchett is the most shoplifted author in Britain, and I wonder how many books of Discworld have been taken from the library and never returned. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
pretty good stock anyway.
I'd say there would. I mean, there's precious. Because as a result of this series, you know, every time I'm in the library, I'm always checking out which Discworld books they have on the shelf, and precious few.
Yeah. Oh well, they're just disappearing from secondhand bookshops. Or in Keats and Chapman, one of the best in Belfast City, is just gone. I completely raided the stacks in Dundalk. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a tough one. Although I forget, well, it's sort of slightly related, I suppose. Um, my copy of Death, The High Cost of Living by Neil Gaiman is stolen from the school library at St. Malachy's College and has since been signed by Neil Gaiman. So
Oh,
I keep thinking I should bring it back to the school and give it back to them, but then I'm like, some kid's just going to ruin the signed book,
right.
probably. So I don't know what to do with it. I'm not even,
Where did you meet Neil?
I just did it. He's doing a signing here in Belfast. I can't remember exactly, remember what he was promoting at the time. But that's when I got signed, and he signed it on the page with the library stamp on it, like so he knew, you know.
Goodness, how did I miss that?
Oh,
He
I
gave
mean,
me
that
a
must have been,
retweet on my absence comic.
yeah, I was in
And
2004, 2005, maybe around that time.
it's such a great book, that.
Yeah, yeah. Which is another reason why I probably haven't got around to giving it back to the skill.
So, pulling back to the tangent, Vorbis is taken over, and I quite like. There's a little turn with him and Didactylos,
Mm.
where Vorbis is, finding out who wrote the turtle moves, and Didactylos sort of kind of throws him a bit with his rhetoric, because he says, no, it wasn't. No, I don't. I think you must be right then. I'll go and work on the next book about how the world does not move on the back of turtle and radio, and he's just gotten away with it, and he's walking out, and he just gives a shout, "Yo, the turtle moves!"
Yeah.
Just chaos. That I really enjoyed that scene.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's something about that I've seen it done in something recently as well. Where you just have, yeah, the learned man kind of putting the two fingers up to authority. Like that's what's happening here, isn't it? Yeah. It's a great line. Yeah, and the two fingers thing actually, it encapsulates the Dacos' character really, really well.
And then we have the memorizing of the library, which kind of is, yes, definitely in the SF and F sort of genre. And I don't know if it doesn't really kind of go with the same heft that I expected it might. I think it is mentioned in the last few pages of the book that he has been, or it's been alluded to, that Brother has later copied out some of the scrolls that were in his head.
Yeah, I think it's one of those instances where Terry, as he often does, takes quite a well-worn conceit, which is like the photographic or eidetic memory, and takes it to its logical extreme, which is, well, okay, surely you should then be capable of remembering an entire library's worth of information. And he, as we already know, has this idea about the power of libraries and the power of words. So L space and all that kind of stuff, and books kind of create their own, or have their own gravity and have their own magic. So like if all that exists inside somebody's head, like it's an interesting concept, but you're right, it doesn't inform plot in any meaningful way. It sort of gives you a few kind of nice, easy Deus Ex Machina moments where, like, obviously, if you need a certain piece of information to get out of a scrape, Brother now has that
Right.
information
Right.
because he has all the information in his head.
Is
So yeah, I
there
think.
is
Go
there
ahead.
something in the absence of that paying off that is the point?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's quite an interesting idea. Like in any other story, this would be like a central kind of narrative device, but in Discworld, it's just Thursday. You know?
Is that, so
Yeah.
we get to where, at the end we've seen, think carefully about faith in God and holy words and where they come from, and we get very little of Brother copying out these manuscripts. So yeah, Brother's already come on that journey where his faith has been quite shaken, but maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves there. I just
Yeah,
want to
maybe.
talk briefly, sorry.
No, I was just agreeing.
I just want to talk briefly about the boat,
Ooh.
which is a really interesting design. I'm not sure what I feel I must have missed some bits of it because it feels like quite unique technology. Is there like a globe powering the boat, or
Yeah, I remember finding this quite difficult to visualize the first time I read it, and I don't think I got much further this time around. Is it, because if it's not a globe, and I think you're right, certainly I had it in my imagination as a globe as well, and perhaps maybe it is described literally that way, but if it's a cylinder and it's turning and
right?
it's and it's got a corkscrew within it, that would be an Archimedes screw, and if it's running in reverse, that would drive something forward rather than sucking the water in. I don't know. Like, I mean, I did single science at school, like GCSE. That's the extent of my scientific knowledge right there. Um,
Bloody
so
artists.
I know. Well, I mean,
Somebody, if you've got an explanation or you know somebody that has, send it to us, and we'll be
I'm
thinking.
sure somebody has dissected it in detail somewhere in the deepest depths of the internet. But yeah, it's a concept that I struggled to get my head around on both occasions. But I will say this about the boat. Oh, actually, no, it's in the next. It's in the next
Let's go there.
description. Okay.
So, part the fourth. The unnamed boat suffers leaking books, and when brother and arm jump overboard, the sea queen claims her price. Washed ashore, brother finds Vorbis and carries him. We learn of hammers, scalbies, Cori Celesti, thunder, and snakes. Simony and Didactylos sail for Omnia and make plans for an assault. Meanwhile, Om encounters small gods, a lion, an old temple, and the unusual Saint Ungulant, though not Angus. Vorbis awakens with a rock, and brother awakens in the citadel, a future bishop. So there is quite a lot going on in that chunk. It's going to be
Hey, you said it instead of me.
interesting to break down. So I had a problem with this chunk.
All right.
I'm kind of over now, but
Okay.
I would want to tell Terry off, even though well maybe it's I find the when we have the boat
Hmm.
and the Sea Queen comes up and she's going to claim her price, and we know that makes a deal to take down Vorbis's ship.
Yeah.
Whatever happened that I read that was I thought they were taking down the unnamed boat. So
Yeah.
we have brother and are safe. They're in the water, as safe as that is. But I misread this and thought we had Didactylos and Simony on a ghost ship.
Ooh.
So for the next 50 or 60 pages, I was reading their narrative as ghosts, and I was trying to work out why this, it wasn't making any sense. And
And I would, but I mean, the precedent is there. We've followed ghosts for entire books before, so like, why not?
so
Yeah.
this is the only like seriously, yeah. But I thought that scene could be more coherent. I mean, I get what Terry is doing with it, that he is
Mm,
leaving it up to the reader's intelligence to see how that gambit of arms pays off.
yeah.
But I just am not smart.
No, like I mean, like you said, there's a lot going on. So the thing that I wanted to mention at the end of the last section that you put at the start of your description here about the unnamed boat being the unnamed boat,
Oh, it's great.
that is also a huge no-no. Like you can't sail in a boat without a name. Boat has to have a name, right? Otherwise you can't sail in it. That's just part of the superstition
Don't they decide it's called the unnamed boat?
but yeah.
What's the name of the horse with no name?
Oh yeah. I think for some, is it okay for horses? It's like I'm not good at riding horses, but I can sail a boat. So yeah, the idea of the unnamed boat, yeah, makes me uncomfortable. Something bad is
I,
going to happen to that boat.
I didn't know that, so yeah, I can add that to my half-baked Alaska part
You
one.
should. Oh
Book
yeah.
one
Well, I mean,
coming soon.
don't just take my kind of Friday night three Guinnesses in word for that. Like definitely, definitely second source it. But boats are always female and they always have to have names. I mean, that's why you have naming ceremonies for boats, I think, and you break the champagne and all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, it's bad luck and you don't get to drink champagne. So, bad times all round.
So when you read that little bait and switch that on pulls with the two boats, that's when you read it properly, that's quite good.
Yeah, I don't remember it throwing me this time around, certainly, but I think, as with all Discworld books, as with all books, I guess, going in for that second reading with a bit of assumed knowledge definitely helps. Like as you say, this is quite plot heavy. It starts to kind of pick up pace here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just looking at it from an overview, it's essentially 70 pages of Vorbis and Brother going through the desert. Um, you can't say not a lot happens to it, but that's not really accurate at all. Um,
No, and it's an interesting.
it's more of that dialogue thing too. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say about the pacing because yeah, we're talking about all the stuff that happens, at sea, and yeah, as you say, there's a bait and switch, and there's a set piece, boats are destroyed and things like that, and then that's all quite frantic, and then we go into this slightly more drawn out section in the desert. I'm making a hand gesture for some reason here doing this, where the pace does slow, but that doesn't mean nothing's happening.
Right.
But there's a sense of kind of dread building, probably between once they arrive in the desert and then they meet Saint Ungulant, where you're like, you just know that brother's making the wrong decision by saving Vorbis's life, but you understand because you know this character so well now that you can't see him doing anything else. You know it's not in him to leave this guy behind.
I was thinking it kind of mirrors the first block, which is a lot of it's set in the garden, and
Yeah,
then we get that dread sort of finale of being in Vorbis' sanctum. But actually,
exactly.
this is a sort of a rhythm that I see in each block. The second where we're in a Thebe, and ending with the audience with a tyrant, where we're at the philosopher's pub, ending with the library being burned down and fleeing. So yeah, there's a bit of a resonant pattern
Yeah,
happening each building on top of what came before.
and the garden versus the desert, the obvious kind of dichotomy there. Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't thought about that.
Um, the footprints is let's talk footprints.
Shall we?
So this well-known
Poem, I
spiritual
suppose you could call it. Yeah.
Christian sort of poem. So it's inspired by Deuteronomy 1 verse 3, which I'm not going to read. Um, it's actually fairly recent. I remember seeing this in my grandmother's home, and the non-religious people as well. Wonderfully resonant verse. I did not see your footprints because that was when you carried me. It's fairly recent. It was written sometime between the 1930s and the 1970s,
Yeah, I can believe
and
that.
at least a dozen people have claimed credit for it.
Oh, okay.
There's been a couple parties in litigation. I couldn't find the results of those.
Against
There's,
who? Against each other? Like, who are they trying to sue for this?
there's also a wonderful half man, half biscuit version.
Oh yeah, sorry, you did send me the link. I did. I didn't respond. Apologize. It's a bit too surreal for me.
So yeah, and we've seen this, I think, as well in the first or second part when they're on the way to a Thebe. We've
Oh
seen
yeah,
this verse sort of checked, and I think it's kind of it's that extending that theme of gods needing someone to believe in them because brother is carrying on.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's there's one set of footprints and Vorbis. And
yeah.
uh, oh god, I'm really warm into this book so much now. Yeah,
Oh, good. Yeah, it does. It definitely bears discussion. This book for sure. I was kind of curious. I did sort of mean to look it up, and then it's been a bit of a time since I finished reading this. But the whole business with the lion, is that based on something or?
um, I'm not sure specifically. I mean, it's quite a religious allegory. There's the old story about taking the thorn out of the lion's paw, and I'm just having
Oh yeah.
a flashback to I think it's an episode of Always Sunny where Mac says that Jesus took a thorn out of the lion's paw. Uh,
Well, I believe that 100% then. I mean, if Max says it, it's got to be true. Yeah, there's definitely, I sort of feel like that we're in kind of religious, symbolic territory here if we're like mucking around with lions in the desert, right? Okay.
right.
That's probably enough.
Yeah, I thought that would be a plot thing that would go somewhere, but the lion is pretty much just a character that they have their interaction with and pass by. Whereas St. Ungulant reminds me very much of the time I experimented with magic mushrooms.
Good. Accurate depiction then, do you think?
Yeah, quite.
Good. I after our dealings with Mark, I've made a bit more of a concerted effort to try to get through um, Rob's biography of Terry. That makes it sound like a chore. It's not. It's actually it's a joy to read. There's some allusions, perhaps, to Terry's involvement in the counterculture. So perhaps there might be some might have been some research for this section. I don't know.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this section. The old temple. I think there's a lot to like about it, but the big one was um where is sensing the other gods around him and
Yeah,
shouting, "No, he's mine!" and is like really terrified, and it comes out of the page.
yeah, yeah. You know, I love a bit of kind of cosmic dread. When we come into this stuff, you know, like when the witches, you know, lose their personality to animals, and this feels like the kind of the godly equivalent of that in a sense, that real existential dread, but at a I mean, what do you even call that? At a theological level, I guess, for So yeah, I can't get enough of that stuff. I maybe I was something that I thought maybe had been missing in this book up until this point. So
It's wonderfully written. The environment, you can hear the flies all around. There's it's I think it's probably, can we say it's on a par with when we get to Cthulhu Temple in, is it Moving Pictures?
yeah, 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 yeah. That's it, and that's exactly the kind of tone that I'm thinking of. Yeah, I think it's up there for sure.
It's just very, it's not big architectural, it's just very close and very personal, and
Yeah.
that's what sells it. Yeah. Scalbies. I didn't know those seabirds were called scalbies.
No, that was news to me as well.
I've heard it said that Vorbis is doesn't really change, and I don't quite agree with that opinion.
Uh-huh.
I think what I see is, I think that Vorbis shifts in his opinion of Brother from just using him as a tool to actually becoming quite fond of him at one
Hmm.
point,
Okay.
or sort of entranced by him. There's almost a little bit of father-son stuff going on,
Yes, I would agree
and
with
then he
that.
cracks him over the head with a rock. And we don't see stuff from Vorbis's point of view here. We don't know how long he's been conscious and heard Brother's half of the conversations. Um, but we do
Yeah,
know that he recognized Brother betrayed him and has now saved his life. Although I don't think he got that memo.
yeah. I mean, I agree with you. I think the the question as to whether Vorbis would have acted as swiftly and decisively to take over Omnia when he gets out of the desert, would that have happened had he just got straight home from Ephebe? I don't know. I mean, it's such an obvious literary trope, you know, the journey into the journey of self-discovery in the desert, that usually, like for a protagonist, I guess you expect them to improve or expect them to kind of come to some sort of realization that's going to make them better, whereas Vorbis comes out of the desert worse, and that just kind of underscores what an irredeemable character he is, you know. And I think it's quite an interesting way of looking at it. You know, they both come out of the desert having learned lessons, and Vorbis has learned entirely the wrong lesson.
Yeah, an arc doesn't have to be an arc shape. It can be a full circle, um,
Indeed, yeah, indeed, and
or a
it doesn't have to
squiggly,
move.
spirally thing.
A character's journey doesn't have to move in one particular direction either.
Right.
So yeah, no, I think it's unfair to say that Vorbis doesn't change. Vorbis becomes the ultimate expression of Vorbis. I
Yeah.
think by the time he gets out of the desert, which is terrifying. I mean, it ups the stakes of the story for every other character massively. So I think it's really, really good storytelling. Part five? We're on part five?
Part 5.
Part 5. I thought you'd given up on the biblical speak. You snuck one in. All right, here we go.
Take the 5th.
Yea, by his own testimony, purveyor of holy artifacts, Dibla is sent forth. Brother cannot hear and seeks counsel from Lutze. Preparation is made for a shield tortoise and a torture tortoise. Ern breaks some pipes. Brother confronts Forbes, and rides on an eagle. As brother is tortured, there's a brave rescue, and Forbes finds out turtle moves. Has a want for some smiting. When brother fails to negotiate with the invaders, returns to Cori Celeste. Combatants learn, this is not the game. Here and now, you're alive. That was me reading Roman numerals in their original form.
The original Northern Irish.
And the original Latin.
Nazis. Accent.
Yeah, my Latin teacher is just like in bits right now. I did my best.
So yeah, back to and Omnia.
Yeah, I mean, you can't get a clearer story structure than this. It's proper hero's journey, returning to the fold kind of stuff.
By now, I'd realized that Actylus and Simony are not ghosts.
Oh, they're alive. I mean, it's a pleasant surprise.
I'm kind of finding it hard to talk about this up until we get on an eagle. I guess it's sort of standard social chaos sort of stuff. Got people figureheads being tortured, plotters conspiring, a cycle thrown.
So again, without giving too much away, hopefully, I mention it a lot. Again, it's probably one for the drinking game if anybody's concocted one as of yet, where Terry's playing with something a little bit here that he's going to come back to later having perfected. And that's his portrayal of a revolution.
Ominous.
So his idea, the portrayal of this kind of revolution against the state and the Church of like you say, I can understand how it feels a little bit kind of maybe not an integral part of Brother's story, and like there's a lot of stuff like about the turtle and how it's used as a weapon of war and all this kind of stuff, and the politics of that and the morality of that doesn't necessarily kind of solidify into like a coherent part of this narrative. But these ideas again come back in a really big way in later Discworld books. So in a book that actually hadn't even been written at the time that I first read this, which is interesting. So yeah, it's really, from a top-down perspective, kind of interesting to see just how early, in the series, Terry is playing with these ideas that are going to come back in a much bigger way later on. So
like when I was reading this, by this point I'm really enjoying it, and yeah, I just find it very difficult to talk about. Yeah, because nothing's really leaping out at me. I'm being stuck in the desert, and to sort of wonder how is he going to get back in time to pull Brother's ass out of the fire.
Yeah, and that was good. Yeah, it had a good ticking clock. Yeah, it had a good sense of pace, and obviously if the kind of revolution wasn't going on around that, it wouldn't have the same kind of stakes. I mean, like I sort of alluded to at the start, I guess this felt quite different. This portrayal of as this like big god who all these people ostensibly believed in at one time or another.
He's really just a teeny fella.
No, he's a teeny fella, but that felt slightly at odds with the portrayal we'd had before of like Blind Io and all these gods just kicking it up on Cori Celeste or whatever. So it was nice that those two ideas got brought together in this section. And goes to the mountain to kick some ass. I can't actually remember exactly why, but it was cool.
Well, Brother doesn't immediately sort of face torture. He gets trolled a bit first.
Oh yeah.
Vorbis is sort of all nice as pie for a while, or he's got plans which aren't very nice.
Yeah, well, I mean,
that
it was kind of
sense.
given away, wasn't it, on the blurb? Like, he was gonna have to face the Quisition at some stage or other.
Don't read the blurb.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, well, there you go. You've just proved your reasons. Proved yourself right there.
Um, Alm's plan to get back by hitching a ride on an eagle.
It's
We're
another great
definitely
payoff
satisfied.
because, like, that's the book starts with eagles and turtles. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, it's so well set up there. Um, it's yeah, and it's not just left at the introduction. We get references to the eagle throughout
Indeed.
as the predator of the tortoise.
And the invasion, I suppose, which is where our jelly baby and friends make their cameo. Everybody turns up to invade all at once, which basically means that it's not worth doing. That's kind of pointless.
Right now, this is a lot of fun. It's we're about to get a Discworld war again.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, it doesn't happen.
You will get one. I'll say no more. You will eventually get one. I
Well, we're
promise.
going to get sorcery, which is
Oh, kind of, but you'll get a proper one. You'll get like a non-magical one. I promise.
don't you say that about sorcery?
I like so. Well, I don't really like it that much, but anyway, we've been there. We've
Okay,
done
okay, that was
that.
a big spoiler to drop. We might
Ah,
have
it's not that
to
big.
we
Who
might
would
have
have
to
thought?
bleep PJ.
Ah, it's not that much of a spoiler. Carry on.
Yeah, yeah, them all showing up on the beach and brother trying to negotiate with them. I mean, one of the things I like about this finale is that we get a few finales. We get the
Mm.
Babylon 5 finales. You
That's
know,
a accurate reference. Yeah.
you mentioned going up to Corey Celeste. And that's the ending or that's the book that I thought we were gonna get.
Yeah, 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 right.
And he really just yeah, kick some ass, as you say. We get something more proximate to the Om we saw in the first block of the book, where he's just shouting and telling people how it is, and yeah, there's a bit of GBH, coming.
Uh,
Um, you've got what else have you got? You've got and brother having their big falling out, where brother tells you're not going to be smiting willy-nilly. Look at what you've done previously. And brother really turns on here, like completely.
yeah, yeah. He
Um,
finally realizes or accepts. I think he knows or had known, but he finally accepts what the power dynamic between him and Om is. That he realizes he's kind of holding all the cards here.
as we've seen this through the book, almost like brother is acting the minute he sort of believes in as in the turtle, the
Yeah.
tortoise,
Uh-huh.
he becomes like Om's conscience.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so much fun.
Yeah. Oh, big time. Yeah. And the fact that relies on him for his very existence, but the opposite isn't true. If Om ceases to exist, brother will continue, but the reverse isn't true. And then how that clashes with Om's personality is one of the recurring delights, I guess, of the book for sure.
Oh, and actually, I mentioned the eagle there, and
Oh yeah.
can't fail to forget Vorbis going out. Vorbis finds out the turtle moves.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Indeed, indeed. And this is a rinse when half brick in a sock moment.
Totally, totally is.
It's,
Yeah.
it's just it's over so quickly, and it's still fun. It's still
Yeah, because
memorable.
it's one of those things, isn't it? When you create an antagonist who is so chilling, so terrifying, so undefeatable almost, like you really need to come up with a good set piece to take that guy out, like Gus in Breaking Bad or whatever, you need to have that iconic moment. And Vorbis gets his right here, turtle to the face. Love it.
Uh, this is a bit of a Deuce smashing ending, where we have just comes down and tells the 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 nation's gathered warriors. You've got to wise up, guys.
Yeah, which is fine because much of the book has been dealing with the particular deus who does the ex machina has a full character arc within the book, so that's acceptable to me. You know, he's a character in this book. He's been through something. His opinion, his outlook on the world has changed, and it feels totally earned. It feels totally legitimate.
Right. That's why I put those words in the or synopsis. This is not a game. Here and now, you're alive. And I
Yeah.
think maybe he didn't know that at the start of the book.
Yes.
Um,
That's
and
yeah.
and because it's not his message to the people isn't just a simple, it isn't him like shouting like I'm gonna shove a steel rod up your eye out your eye hole. It's yeah, he's passing along wisdom um and yeah, take note.
Indeed.
That's what wisdom's for.
And it's quite actually, and it ends on a relatively optimistic outlook in a way, then, doesn't it? You know, that like, despite Terry's, what we know as Terry's atheism, I suppose, or humanism at least, you know, that doesn't end on this. There's a lot of criticism of organized religion in this book, but it doesn't end on that note. It ends on quite a hopeful note in terms of how, you know, if people internalize and believe the right things, or if they learn the right lessons, doesn't matter where they learn them from necessarily, you know.
Yeah, and how often are you going to get a god literally appearing in front of thousands of people who sort of all pretty much agree, at least for a time, that this was a god appearing in front of them? I know Discworld folk have a different relationship with gods. If somebody starts talking smack about them, they got a lightning bolt to the tavern. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. It really is an optimistic do.
That whole recurring thing actually about there's a recurring gag about atheism within this, where like, who is it Simone is the atheist or somebody, and the gods are always trying to get him. And like the fact that the gods are trying to get him doesn't encourage him to believe in them. If anything, it's the opposite,
Yeah,
which I do enjoy.
I think this is
Um,
big Actalos. Yeah,
oh yeah, yeah, of course. Sorry, yeah. Good times. Yeah, and that's, you know, it does like wrap up in quite both thematically and in terms of narrative. You know, it does leave you feeling quite satisfied, I think, doesn't it?
yeah, absolutely. That was the word. It was on my lips. Yeah, I
You're getting
think
good at this.
like I've said a few times during this podcast, I can feel it shooting up my list, just talking about it. And I guess this is the thing and why we call our podcast on some handles GNU.
Mm.
If you keep talking about it, you keep things alive. So, go and talk to people about your Discworld reading experiences. Whether they're, you'll probably find that, what I don't know if if they've read Discworld, but you might likely find that they have. And this podcast has been so good for just starting conversations. I was on a train last week. I got on and I was reading a Discworld novel, and the guy next to me says, "Oh, good choice." An older fellow.
Oh,
We spent the next 20 minutes chatting about Pratchett and PG Woodhouse.
oh, lovely.
It's just those little connections like that this stuff makes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess this time 21 years ago, I wouldn't have gone anywhere without a book either in my pocket or in my bag. And I would say at that time in my life, about half the books I owned were probably Discworld books. And that rereading a bunch of these kind of electronically, they have lost a bit of that magic in that sense, you know. So I maybe make a bit of an effort to kind of to do analog from here on in. We'll see.
Small gods. I read Discworld. Shall we do some favorite quotes or favorite moments?
Yeah, we should. I've queued up one that now feels tonally wrong. Um, just kind of where I've been at, I guess, in terms of work and stuff. I've um been working on this documentary I've kind of alluded to a few times on the pod that's nearly finished. I'll plug it maybe before the end, but I've been looking a lot at the recent history of Northern Ireland, and obviously reading about religion and people's attitudes to religion and violence and things like that in this book. The quote that stood out to me the most was, "And they were engaged in religion. You could tell by the knives. It's not murder if you do it for a god."
I remember that one sticking out to me as well.
Yeah, and not necessarily in a positive way, but in a way that felt uniquely true for us, I guess, you know.
I've got three.
Funnier ones, I hope.
First is just a bit smug, and knowing all holy piety in public and all peeled grapes and self-indulgence in private.
It's nice.
Uh, Popular one I've seen on many is "Go on, do deformed rabbit." It's my favorite.
See it recurring. Yeah.
And the last one is that the book's other mantra. There's good eating in one of them,
Oh yeah.
which I think is, and I chose that specifically because it suits the book. It fits. There is good eating in this book. There's a lot of sustenance. So that's kind of why I went for that. And also a shout out to the Book of Dibla,
Yeah.
also a joy. Yeah.
We should reiterate probably that we're not encouraging people to actually eat tortoises, I assume. Or maybe we are. I hear there's good eating on one.
No, let's send us your tortoise cuisine reviews on Twitter and
Getting in so much trouble. This is the outrage that we were calling for. Yes, here we go. Yeah. Let's get Peter worked up about this. Good times. So what are we plugging?
What are we
Straight
plugging?
into that. Straight in.
Patreon.com/Andy Luke, Patreon.com/Andy Luke, Patreon.com/Andy Luke, Patreon.com/Andy Luke, and also where I'm doing that novella I spoke of, or the
Oh yeah.
novel, set on the Alaskan seas. But also, I'm not sure if we'll get an episode out for mid-March. We'll see how it goes.
Hmm.
But you don't have to wait to the end of this. I'm relaunching my YouTube channel on
Woohoo.
March 17th with short, punchy reviews of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, followed by Doctor Who. So if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe at youtube.com/at Andrew Luke. I'd be so grateful. And maybe if I get something together just for, so we don't have to wait to March 17th. Maybe I can come up with something.
Yeah, nice one. Yeah, good call. Um, I'm going to, because I finally know when it's going to go out, but I'll definitely plug it again closer to the time. So I have a radio documentary going out on BBC Radio 4 called John Maher, The Devil's Zone, and it will be on at 7:15 on Sunday, the 26th of April. So I'm going to plug it now because I've just been working on it all day, and I'll probably forget to plug it later. So there you go. Mark your diary, or at least check it out on BBC Sounds, because frankly, who's sitting listening to the radio at 7:15 on a Sunday night? But that's going to be a fun one. It deals with a lot of similar themes about religion and the pull and effect it can have on our lives, and the effect that superstition and belief can have on our lives. And it's a really, really interesting story, a real life kind of historical investigation into a really bizarre event or series of events in the recent history of Northern Ireland. So if you're a fan of this book and if you're a fan of us, I think it might be up your street. So check it out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sold, of course. Yeah. Wow. Cool. Links in the description as they come.
Indeed.
Um,
Do you want to shout out your
yeah,
top patrons?
let's say some thank yous. Top patrons: Arslan Hyder Ali, Art K, and particularly Ian Lawther, who also goes halfers on the Zoom bill, which allows us to do that. So
Thanks again.
thanks very much, chaps. And to all my patrons. You can find this podcast at an insanely long Spotify URL, but you can condense it by going to anchor.fm/ I've never read Discworld. Discworld GNU on Facebook and Twitter. That's in the URL, but yeah, I've never read Discworld will take you to us. Please come and talk to us on social media. I'm so lonely.
We're getting a bit sick of talking to each other, frankly. Help us out.
And that's I think that's it. I mean, I really enjoyed making this episode. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you've come around to it. I was wondering if it was going to be one of those ones that definitely held up on a second read because people do hold it in such high regard. I held it in fairly high regard. And I'm glad to say that for me, it did. Something that I vaguely meant to mention earlier, and I might just plug it because it's not my work actually, but I'm going to plug it anyway. Just after I read this, I read the series is called The Tyrant Philosophers, 2 books in the series so far. The author is Adrian Tchaikovsky, and it deals with a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same ideas as Small Gods, but does it from a lot more serious socio-political kind of point of view. Still got elements of humor in it, but I would say it is to Small Gods what The Expanse is to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So if that sounds like it might be up your street, then check it out. I've just finished the first 2 books in the series, and I really, really enjoyed them.
Sounds high concept. I know there's an awful lot of love for
Very
Tchaikovsky.
very
I
high
must get
concept.
around to reading some of his stuff that I have.
Yeah, I have to say it's the first 2 books of his that I read. Wasn't overly familiar with his work before, but yeah, I especially having just been reading Small Gods, I found it really, really interesting kind of counterpoint.
So I've a confession to take us out on.
Oh God, my goodness, a bombshell.
Our next book is Lords and Ladies.
Oh yeah, I must dig out my copy. I do have a physical copy.
Ordinarily, I have a rule where I don't, if I'm on editing, I don't start the next book until the episode is.
Oh yeah, we've had some delays. Mostly my fault. We've had some delays.
It's been all right. I kind of about 150 pages through Lords and Ladies.
Oh my, I've got some catching up to do.
Hear more about what I thought of that next time. It's good. It's really good.
Yeah, I obviously have. I mean, I'm 99% sure I've got a copy of it in the filing cabinet back there. So I know that I've read it. My recollection of it is vague and not glowingly positive. So I'm excited to get stuck back in. I'm sure there'll be a significant reappraisal from my end.
Oh yes.
So that might be worth checking in for
yes.
if you're interested in that.
The roles are reversed.
Yeah, it could be an interesting one. Let's find out.
Yeah. All right. Thanks very much for joining us.
Until next time.
Yep. Cheers.
Bye.